Sometimes it is hard to imagine that Czechoslovakia was once among the most prosperous countries of the world. Communists came to power in 1948 and, since then, systematically deprived people of the most basic rights and needs. Over 40 years of terror finally ended in November '89 in what became known as Velvet Revolution. Václav Havel, a frequently imprisoned playwright, was elected a president. Against all conventions, he surrounded himself with dissident fellow artists, loosely referred to as president's advisors. With no professional politician in sight, they set about creating the politics of the impossible.
Budou křičet.
I think that it is the most important time after 20 years.
My predecessors have been telling you the same thing in various forms for the last 40 years. How our country blossoms, how many more billions of tons of steel we produced, how happy we all are, how we trust our government, and what wonderful future awaits us. I presume that you didn't elect me your president to continue these lies.
Abych vám I já lhal.
I will only mention one very precious quality, his courage. To fight alone against such power for so many years, against a totalitarian regime which we thought would never end, that requires great strength. When I asked one of Havel's close colleagues what is he really like, he said he's a naive enthusiast. I think that his truly grand ideas and proposals to the rest of Europe confirm this picture of him. Many of us feel that the politics of future will need to contain more of what I'd call a human spirit. It means that the usual utilitarian politics will have to be fertilized by culture and spirit. This is the direction that we, and especially our president, believe in, and that is why there are so many people from the world of culture and arts in the current government. Our demonstrations were conducted in the same way as great theatrical events, in every sense, in its imagery as well as in its program. For instance, it is a fantastic moment when a crowd of million people suddenly transforms from a heated rally into a quiet, gentle song. This has shown to everyone that they should not seek revenge, that it is possible to fight freedom in a different way, in a way that was absolutely incomprehensible to the totalitarian regime. They could manipulate everything, but they could not manipulate the feeling and the spirit of the people.
Všechno dokázala ovlivňovat, ale nedokázala ovlivnit ducha a cítění lidí.
People around the world are wondering how the servile, humiliated and skeptical people in Czechoslovakia could muster the enormous strength to suddenly, in a space of a few weeks, dispose of a totalitarian system in an altogether civilized and peaceful manner. We are wondering ourselves. For years, we lived in a false unity. They try to convince us that we're all equal, that there are few, if any, differences between ourselves. It is only now, in today's situation, that we will be able to discover what we are really like, because no one is forcing us to do anything anymore. No one will save us, and hopefully no one will liberate us again. So we can only be defeated by our own weaknesses.
To znamená, že poraziť nás môžu iba naše zlé vlastnosti.
Ja si nemyslím, že máme nejakých nepriateľov vonku, takých, ktorí by nás zrazili.
We are our own worst
Najväčšími
enemy.
nepriateľmi sme si my
Our
sami.
tiny little souls,
Naše malé
our
dušičky,
unwillingness to be active,
naša neochota
our
byť
laziness,
aktívny,
our negative national
naša
traits, if we
lenivosť,
can call it that.
naše zlé národné
husband is an expert
vlastnosti,
on
ak
that
teda
theme.
by sa to dalo tak povedať. Môj
Smallness
muž je na
and
toto odborník.
provinciality can defeat us.
Malosť a provincionalita nás môžu zraziť.
Ako sociológ
As a sociologist, I think that the most terrible legacy of our past isn't the devastated land or devastated economy, but devastated interior of our people. All of my research clearly indicates that people in this country are lacking in motivation and care. They don't want to work, and they don't know how to work.
Nechce sa im pracovať a nevedia pracovať.
the totalitarian regime reduced Czechoslovakia into a third world country. Factories are equipped with antiquated machinery, and the workers don't seem to care. Why should they? The pay is miserable, and worse is yet to come.
The whole sectors of the industry produce goods that no one wants, while the much-needed goods are not available. The state that calls itself a state of workers humiliates and exploits its workers. Our backward economy wastes energy of which we have little. A country which could once be proud of its educated people now spends so little on education that it is placed 72nd in the world. We destroyed our soil, rivers and forests, and we have the worst environment in Europe today.
A máme dnes nejhorší životní prostředí v celé Evropě.
Masses of citizens live in grey, faceless apartment blocks, crudely put together by the state, to house up to 150,000 people in one single suburb of cold concrete. The environment suffers from an onslaught of pollution and acid rain. Forests are dead and dying. Rivers resemble canals of industrial waste. But there are no easy answers. Czechoslovakia needs its industry to be able to emerge from the quagmire of economic misery.
It would be very unwise to see the sad legacy of the last 40 years as something foreign that we inherited from some distant relative. We must accept it as something that we have perpetrated on ourselves. This situation can be compared to someone leaving the table after a long feast. Then someone else sits there
Potom odišiel od stola, sadli si tam iní a čašník prichádza s účtom.
Za těch 40 let
Everything was destroyed during the 40 years of the terrible reign of the Bolsheviks and the communists. There is no area left intact. Not just the economy. Even the football doesn't work. Nothing works here.
Ekonomiku, ale tady nefunguje ani fotbal, tady nefunguje prostě nic.
Túto situáciu sa dá
This
charakterizovať
can be
ako situáciu
described
po
as a
vojne.
situation after
Tu
the war.
vlastne bola dlhodobá
We had a
vojna
long
jednej
war
skupiny
of one group of
obyvateľstva
people
voči
against the
zvyšku.
rest.
Že?
A
Tichá
quiet civil
občianska
war
vojna, kde ten
where the
zvyšok
rest
do
fought
istej
through a
miery
kind of a
bojoval tým, že
sabotage,
sabotoval,
while the
a
communists
tá
fought
skupina
by
zase bojovala
plundering
tým, že
and
drancovala, že
prolonging their
predĺžovala
grip on
svoju
power
moc alebo
by
dobu svojej
living
moci
as if
tým,
there were no
že,
tomorrow after
žila
they're
podľa
gone.
hesla po nás potopa.
As long as the communists don't regain the position they were in, because we were so gentle and civilized that they're just hiding for a moment. We are saying that we don't want to win the elections, even if there were a chance to win, but there isn't one anyway. Of course, it's easy to be a hero and say you don't want to win when you know you can't. But we really don't want to. I think that the communists must learn to be humble.
Sa musia komunisti naučiť skromnosti.
Boli sme pri moci
We
nepretržite
have been in
42
power without
rokov
an interruption for
a
the last
v
42
skúšku
years,
zvládnutia
and we clearly didn't
komunistická
pass the
strana
test.
Československa
The party needs a period of
neurobila
rest
dobre.
before it can harbor any
Domnievam sa, že
ambitions
aby
to
mohla
lead
si robiť
again or
ambície
to participate in the
znovu
leadership.
byť na čele štátu, alebo lepšie povedané podieľať sa na moci, tak potrebuje určitý oddychový čas.
The Soviet Union condemned Stalin as a criminal of this century, but the Czechoslovak Communist Party still didn't condemn Gottwald, Stalin's right hand, who is covered in Czech blood from head to toe.
A je politý od hlavy až k nohou českým krví. Českou krví ho neodsoudila.
Many people feel that the communists should have been dealt with more decisively. The previous leaders are still enjoying their villas in comfort, and there is a suspicion that they keep great sums of money in foreign banks. Still, Havel's government insists that the communists will not be treated in the same way that they used to treat others.
The new generation must never, ever experience what we had to experience.
Víte se, já sám jsem překvapen.
I am rather surprised myself, because my father was executed by the communists in the 50s, so you could say that I have a certain right of revenge. But it doesn't even occur to me, because that is not the way. You can't begin to build a civilized, democratic society by violence. That would be extremely dangerous.
Začínat budovat zdravou a demokratickou a svobodnou společnost násilím, mstou, je strašně nebezpečné.
Z naší země
Our country can now permanently radiate love, desire for understanding, and a strength of spirit and ideas. This radiation can then become our personal contribution to the world of politics.
Dik prema kana mekçak merava bo mesiam tumari shukar prema, kanamek chak merava, ushimamo dik prema, kanamek chak merava, pomesiom, tumari, sukar chai romani, oilo maneduka, jafal tute ja, pomesiom, tumari, sukar chai romani, oilo maneduka, jafal tute ja.
Still, life in the country goes on as always. These people survived the Nazis as well as the communists, and their resilience is quietly poised for further hardships should they come. Many seek solace in the church, an abrupt change from the communist past when believers were prosecuted.
Our government is likely to become a government of national sacrifice because the people will blame us for the total failure of the last 40 years. It doesn't sound logical, but they will. I think it is very important at the moment that everyone works wherever the society needs him or her the most. In my opinion, the society has a greater need of good politicians than good architects for now, until it becomes politically stable. Then I will have no further reason to continue my political career, and if I'll have enough health and energy left in me, naturally, I will be an architect again. I always try to do whatever I consider to be necessary and inevitable. As soon as I'll discover that the society no longer needs people with our kind of competence and credentials, I will only be too happy to go back to the theatre and other media where I worked.
Veľmi rád sa vrátim do divadla a do médií, v ktorých som pracoval doteraz. Mám tým na mysli film, televízia, rozhlas, Európa, svet a podobne.
No ja sa teším
I
na
am
den,
looking forward to the day when my services will not be required and I'll be able to return to my profession, writing.
K tej svojej profesii spisovateľskej.
Alexander Dubček and his government ventured into a bold experiment of liberalization in 1968. Prague Spring, as it was called, something of a predecessor of perestroika, was brutally repressed by the invasion of the troops of the Warsaw Pact.
Možná se ptáte,
You may ask what kind of a republic I dream about.
Odpovím vám.
I dream about a republic that is independent, free and democratic,
demokratické,
a republic that is economically prosperous but also socially just.
A zároveň
In other words, a human
spravedlivé,
republic that serves its
zkrátka
people
o republice lidské,
and therefore may hope
která
that the people
slouží
will serve it.
člověku a proto má naději, že i člověk poslouží jí.
Ale je to aj iná možnosť.
There is another possibility.
Je tu možnosť,
Perhaps
že
we
sme
have
práve
now
teraz
planted into
vložili
our
do tejto
society
spoločnosti
a
akýsi
kind of a
gén
gene of
našej
our own
vlastnej
way
cesty do
into the future.
budúcnosti.
It's
Je
possible
možné,
that we'll embark
že
on our
dokážeme
own road, which may redefine the
vykročiť vlastnou
criteria
cestou a
of
tá naša vlastná
prosperity,
cesta by podľa môjho názoru
not measured by
mala
profit
spočívať v
and
tom,
economic growth,
že
but by
dokážeme
quality of
ako
life.
kritérium prosperity tejto spoločnosti sformulovať nie rentabilitu, zisk, hospodársky rast, ale kvalitu života.
We have a new set of problems now, and we'll have to solve these problems. But that's the way it should be, because society without problems is very sad, and I hope that we'll never have to live in that sort of society again. Besides, there is enough of us to be able to cope with our problems in future.
To tiež je veľká výhoda.
It is a great advantage to be at the very start. One has more energy then.
Ako keď len pokračuje.
Our republic is in the center of Europe, and we feel thoroughly European. I certainly do.
Cítime sa byť
I know
Európania.
Russian literature as well as French, English, German, Spanish, music, culture. I don't need to go back to Europe. I am European.
Ja sa nemusím vrácať do Európy. Ja som Európanka.
The fact that we were a part of the East was a historical and cultural error. This country was always culturally Western. So I think that our return to Europe won't be so difficult in that sense. But we do have a problem of a backward economy, an ecological catastrophe, and a moral abyss. So the terrible combination of these problems clearly indicates that the road ahead will be difficult. We have to realize that it won't be a sprint. It will be a bloody long run.
To není sprint, co děláme teď, ale že to je běh na sakra dlouhou trať.
It'll take a while.
They were the good times. Now, over a year later, the euphoria of revolution is all but gone. People have had enough of talking about the bright future. They want everything in a hurry, today. Naturally, everyone realized at the outset that there will be problems, but even the pessimists among us couldn't quite expect the magnitude of it all. Is the dream really over?
There is increasing nationalist tension bordering on neo-Nazi extreme. The very same squares that saw demonstrations proclaiming love and unity are now occupied by angry mobs of Slovak separatists, crying out for the blood of Czechs, Hungarians, Jews, Gypsies, and the government. There is a widespread fear that Czechs and Slovaks may choose to divide the country into two separate states.
The Slovaks I know are all great people. Personally, I haven't met a single Slovak nationalist. I think it's only some 10 idiots who seek attention and who feel some historical wrong or what the hell. They're full of complexes.
Pocity nějaký ukřivděnosti, nebo co z historie, nebo kdo ví, jakýho čerta v nich prostě to si léčí svý mindráky.
Ja odmietam tvrdenie, že
I reject the allegations that Slovaks are
nacionalisti. Myslím, keď niekto tvrdí, že
Someone
slovenský
claims that
národ
Slovak people are
je nacionalistický,
nationalistic,
separatistický,
or
dokonca
even
antisemický,
anti-Semitic or
fašistický.
fascistic.
To sú veľmi
They're all very
povrchné
superficial
a
and
veľmi
dangerous
nebezpečné
stigmas, and
nálepky,
they
ktorých
stick.
sa potom ťažko
Most of
zbavujeme.
all,
Ale najmä
they're
sú
not true.
nepravdivé.
Prečo práve Slovensko
Why was Slovakia singled out as
bolo
fascistic?
fašistické?
I think that
Myslím
this
si, že
too is in
toto je
someone's
tiež
interest.
niečí
It
záujem,
is someone's
toto je
intention
tiež
and
niečí
tactical
úmysel
ploy
a niekto chce
to
nás
wipe our
takticky dostať
nation
tam,
from the face of the earth.
aby sme úplne náš národ ako taký zmizli z povrchu zemského.
As an economist, I feel that these separatists are beginning to isolate us from the rest of the world. So they told you that I have fascistic tendencies. I, who defend Slovak nation, Slovakia, independent Slovakia. And what Slovakia? Fascistic Slovakia? We want modern Slovakia.
My chceme moderné Slovensko.
We are solving all of our problems through agreement so far. Not a single punch was thrown in Czechoslovakia, nor did a stone break a single window.
Political spectrum is wide and getting wider. The more extreme groups seem to go on a hunger strike whenever they want to press their cause. Streets are divided in their sympathies, and lively arguments are the order of the day. After 40 years of forced silence, it is not surprising to see people engaged in a perpetual debate. The fragile economy is showing the legacy of chronic inefficiencies left over from the past 40 years. There are shortages of basic food items, and long queues are formed wherever there is anything for sale.
Mr. Havel promised us the truth and love, but we are still queuing up for potatoes like we did during the communists, perhaps even more. In fact, we're all better off in the communist regime. That is the tragedy. Some 2 or 3 years will demand sacrifice, and our people won't be able to see the fruits of reform yet. They will be apparent later. So for this kind of economy, this kind of justice, Mr. Klaus, Mr. Chalfa and Mr. Havel, thank you very much.
The Minister of Finance tells the people that things are tough and they are going to get tougher. Mindful of his warning, they raid the banks and most withdraw their entire savings. This money does not always flow back into the economy. Much of it ends up exchanged for hard currency through street hustlers who seem to be strangely tolerated by the police. People also seem to be spending their money in open-air markets, where they sell practically anything and everything, goods that are often stolen, or at least not quite kosher. Crime is rising. Law and order, previously maintained through police brutality, is now challenged daily by money-changing thieves, street battles of punks, gypsies, and other marginal groups who exploit the new openness.
Situace opravdu je kritická.
The situation is really critical.
Kritická,
It is critical because the minority, the ones who are loud, who shout and wave their fists, are gaining votes, while the reasonable majority is forced into defense, sometimes even passivity.
Vlastně získává hlas a rozumná většina je zatlačena do obrany. Někdy až do pasivity.
Já se domnívám, že se
It seems to me that it's only a case of freer expression of those who always had dormant racist ideas. They are louder than in the past, so it appears that racism is on the rise. But I don't think there is too many of them, and there is no particular growth. Those kinds of people were always here.
A podle mě to ani nějak zvlášť nenarůstá. Takoví lidi u nás byli vždycky.
Samozrejme,
of course, there are people who feel humiliated. They were silent, afraid for 20 or 40 years. They never said anything, agreed with everything, and now they feel guilty that they never spoke out. So they want to hit someone. Doesn't matter who. Anyone will do.
Chcú si udrieť, je im to jedno. Koho? Vyberú si už niečo.
We have to differentiate even between the Jews, who are the thieves and who are really, I mean, we have great scientists in history. Bernstein was a Jew, he was an artist, and Edison, I don't know, was he Jewish too? I mean, they left something, so, you know, we must differentiate there as well. The communists left a sort of a valve in the society, a valve of racism and hate, which the majority could always use when their emotions overflowed. They were always safe in the knowledge that no matter how oppressed they were, there was someone who was even lower, even deeper. And that was always the gypsy. The punks are killing off the gypsies, but gypsies are people too. They beat us everywhere. We don't want the regime like before. We want decent life. I don't like democracy. Not at all. They have to clean up those punks. They're killing the gypsies. Our children can't go to school for the fear of punks.
One of the first post-revolutionary acts of Havel's government was a general amnesty of all prisoners save the murderers. It was not a popular decision. Many released prisoners went on a rampage of crime and violence and found themselves back in jail in no time at all. The new society bears with it a great number of problems previously not experienced. There is an influx of refugees from other East European countries, as well as Africa. In a piece of bittersweet irony, they are housed in abandoned barracks of the Soviet occupying army. Czechoslovakia can hardly afford refugees, but equally, it cannot afford to turn them back. Czechs and Slovaks have been political refugees for some 50 years, and as such, owe others solidarity that they would have expected themselves.
It is not at all true that our revolution failed. It simply didn't end yet, and no work can be judged until it is finished.
My máme jednu obrovskou nevýhodu.
We have one great disadvantage, because now that we are so overworked, it starts to show that we are amateurs, that we are extremely naive in what we do. It simply shows that Havel was never a president, and I was never a member of parliament.
Havel nikdy nebyl prezidentem, že já jsem nikdy nebyl poslancem.
Mimochodem, když se
If you
podíváte
look
na
at this
vývoj
country
této
after the
země
revolution in November,
po 17.
we have to admit
listopadu a
that it
během
is an
17.
extraordinary
listopadu,
success
tak
of
musíme
the
říct, že to je
amateurs.
mimořádný úspěch amatérů.
We have lost 20 years and we can't afford to lose one more day.
Reforma, to je bolestivá
Reform
operácia,
is a painful
po ktorej sa
operation,
pacient definitívne
but it
uzdraví.
results in healing of the patient.
Ale že to obdobie operácie,
But the duration of this
rekonvalescencie,
operation and the
iste nebude
convalescence will not
jednoduché.
be simple.
S tým
We have to
treba
accept this.
rátať.
We have
A
decided
myslím,
in
že my
favor
sme sa
of the
rozhodli
operation
pre
rather than death.
operáciu radšej ako pre smrť.
Unemployment, racism, crime, inflation, food shortages, confusion. Is this the great dream of democratic society? There is much to build, but before things get better, they will get worse. Rather like the statues of deposed and discredited communist leaders, the old ways need to be destroyed and forgotten. Only then, free of this burden, can Czechs and Slovaks fulfill Havel's enlightened vision.
A terrible thought comes to mind. Maybe it wasn't the regime or a handful of some communist monsters that were responsible for the devastation of all values. Maybe it was each and every one of us who helped in perpetrating this vicious circle of lies. Still, there is some hope that, against all odds, the people of Czechoslovakia will find the strength to rise from the 40 years of darkness and build a prosperous, just society. Unless, of course, the President Havel's politics of the impossible turn out to be exactly that, impossible.